In the beginning, there was only chaos. There was no light or darkness, no earth or sky, only a vast and formless void stretching endlessly in all directions. And then, from this great void, emerged Gaia, the earth. She would become the mother of all that followed, the bedrock upon which existence would be built. But Gaia was not the only one to emerge from the darkness. Tartarus took shape in the deepest depths beneath the earth, a great pit that would one day serve as a prison for the most terrible beings in existence. They were then joined by night and day, who would put an end to the reign of Erebus, darkness, with the eternal cycle of dusk and dawn emerging. From her divine being, Gaia brought forth Uranos, the sky. He rose above her as a vast dome studded with stars, stretching from horizon to horizon, and so the earth and sky became one, locked in an eternal embrace that would shape all creation to come. Together, they filled the world with children. First came the Titans, 12 in number, 6 sons and 6 daughters, beings of immense power who would one day rule the cosmos. Among them was Oceanus, a great river that encircled the world. He would be joined by his brother Hyperion, the sun, who would ride his great chariot across the sky, shining light down upon the earth. But when day became night, his daughter Selene, the moon, would emerge, shining her light into the darkness. Then came the Cyclopes, 3 one-eyed brothers whose skill at the forge would one day produce weapons fit for gods. And finally, the Hecatoncheires, 3 monstrous brothers, each with 100 hands and 50 heads, so terrible that even their own father could not bear to look upon them. Uranus seized these monstrous children and hurled them down into Tartarus, that lightless pit beneath the earth. There they would remain, imprisoned in darkness, their father pretending they had never existed. But Gaia felt every moment of her children's suffering, and when Uranus turned his cruelty towards the Titans, her patience broke. She fashioned a great sickle from grey adamantine, a substance harder than any metal and sharper than any blade, and presented it to her children. "Your father has gone too far," she told them. "Who among you will set things right?" Most of the Titans recoiled, but Cronus, the youngest and most ambitious, stepped forward. That night, when Uranus descended from the heavens to lie with Gaia, as he always did, Cronus was waiting. He swung the blade in a single vicious arc. The stroke was clean and brutal, severing his father's genitals. Uranus let out a great scream and fled back into the heavens, never to descend again. Where his blood fell upon the earth, it gave birth to the giants, beings of terrible size and strength, and to the Furies, ancient spirits of vengeance who would pursue the guilty across the world, punishing all those who broke sacred oaths or murdered their own kin. But his severed flesh that had fallen into the sea gave rise to something else entirely. As it sank beneath the waves, foam gathered around it, white and churning, and from that foam rose Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty. She was the last child of Uranus, born from an act of brutal violence, yet she would become the goddess who ruled over desire, passion, and the hearts of both mortals and gods alike, destined to inspire both the greatest love stories and the most destructive wars the world would ever know. Cronus had overthrown his father, and the age of the Titans had begun. Part 2. The Titans. Cronus took his sister Rhea as his wife and made himself ruler of the cosmos. For a time the world prospered under Titan rule, but Cronus had not freed the Cyclopes or the Hecatoncheires from Tartarus. They still remained imprisoned in that lightless pit, and Gaia had not forgotten them. Nor could Cronus escape the memory of how he had seized power. He had betrayed and mutilated his own father. If he could do such a thing, what was to stop his children from doing the same to him? The fear grew inside him, gnawing at his thoughts until he could bear the uncertainty no longer. He went to Gaia and demanded to know his fate. The prophecy she delivered was the very thing he dreaded. One of his sons would overthrow him, just as he had overthrown Uranus. Cronus refused to accept it. When Rhea bore their first child, a daughter named Hestia, he took the infant from her arms and swallowed her whole. The child did not die, for gods cannot truly die, but she vanished into the darkness of her father's stomach, trapped in a living prison with no hope of escape. One by one the children came: Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon. Each time Rhea gave birth, Cronus took the infant and swallowed it down. Each time Rhea screamed and begged, but her husband would not listen. The prophecy had to be prevented, no matter the cost. When Rhea became pregnant for the 6th time, she could bear it no longer. She went to Gaia, desperate for help, and together they devised a plan. When the child was born, a son, whom she named Zeus, Rhea wrapped a stone in swaddling clothes and presented it to Cronus. He snatched it from her hands and swallowed it without looking, convinced he had consumed the last threat to his throne. But Zeus lived. Rhea had hidden him in a cave on the island of Crete, where he was raised in secret by nymphs, and fed on honey and the milk of a divine goat named Amalthea. The infant's cries were masked by the Curetes, warrior priests who clashed their spears against their shields whenever the baby made a sound, drowning out any noise that might reach Cronus's ears. Back in the heavens, Cronus believed himself victorious. 6 children born, 6 children swallowed. The prophecy had been thwarted. But fate, he would soon realize, cannot be cheated so easily. For on Crete, still hidden in darkness, Zeus, the child who would one day destroy him, was already preparing for war. Part 3. The Titanomachy. Years passed. On Crete, Zeus grew from infant to child, from child to youth, and finally to manhood. When he emerged from the caves at last, he was no longer the helpless baby Rhea had smuggled away, but a god in his full power. Yet he did not challenge Cronus directly. Instead, he disguised himself as a cupbearer and approached his father with a cup of honeyed wine laced with a powerful potion. Cronus drank without suspicion, and within moments he was doubled over in agony, his body rejecting everything he had consumed over the years. First came the stone, then Poseidon, then Hades, followed by the rest of the gods, Hera, Demeter, and Hestia. Each emerged fully grown, and each burned with fury and rage after their long imprisonment. At last, the 6 children of Cronus stood united against their father, and the war that followed, the Titanomachy, threatened to tear the world apart. For 10 years, gods and titans clashed across the earth and sky, their battles scorching mountains and boiling seas. But for all their great power, neither side could gain the upper hand, and the war dragged on without end. It was Gaia who finally revealed the key to victory. Deep in Tartarus, the Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires still languished in chains, imprisoned just as they had been under Uranus. If Zeus freed them, she promised they would fight at his side and turn the tide of the war. And so Zeus descended into that lightless pit and struck off their chains. The Cyclopes, weeping with gratitude, returned to their forges and crafted weapons of immense power. For Zeus, the thunderbolt, a weapon so terrible that nothing could withstand it. For Poseidon, a trident that could shake the earth and command the seas. And for Hades, a helm of darkness that rendered its wearer invisible. Armed with these divine weapons, the balance of power finally shifted. The Hecatoncheires hurled boulders the size of mountains with their 100 hands, an endless barrage no defense could stop. Zeus wielded lightning itself, and slowly the Titans, one by one, began to fall. When the war finally ended, Zeus stood victorious. The defeated Titans were cast down into Tartarus, imprisoned in the same darkness where they had once left their monstrous brothers to suffer. But Atlas, who had led the Titan forces, received a crueler punishment. He was condemned to stand at the western edge of the world, holding the entire weight of the sky upon his shoulders for all eternity. With victory secured, the three sons of Cronus divided the cosmos by casting lots. Zeus drew the sky and became king of the gods. Poseidon drew the sea, and Hades the underworld. Each god would be master of their domain alone, while the earth itself would remain common ground, shared by all. The gods took up residence on Mount Olympus, the highest peak in Greece, and from this day forward they would be known as the Olympians. The age of the Titans was over. The age of the gods had begun. Part 4. Typhon. But Gaia was not satisfied. She had helped Zeus overthrow Cronus, hoping he would free all her children from Tartarus. Instead, Zeus had cast the Titans down into that same lightless pit, replacing one set of prisoners with another. Her patience, tested beyond all measure, finally broke. Deep within herself, in caverns that had never seen light, Gaia conceived one final child. She mated with Tartarus itself, and from that union came Typhon, the most terrible creature the world had ever seen. He was so vast that his head brushed against the stars. 100 serpent heads sprouted from his shoulders, each one hissing and spitting venom. His eyes blazed with fire, and from his back spread wings large enough to blot out the sun itself. Typhon mated with Echidna, a creature half woman and half serpent, and together they produced a host of monsters that would plague the world for generations to come. Cerberus, the three-headed hound who would one day guard the gates of the underworld. The nine-headed Hydra, whose poisoned blood could kill with a single drop. The fire-breathing Chimera, part lion, part goat, part serpent. These children of Typhon would one day test the greatest heroes Greece would ever know. But for now, Typhon himself was coming for Olympus. When the gods saw him approaching, terror seized them. Even the mighty Olympians, who had overthrown the Titans and reshaped the cosmos, fled before this horror. They disguised themselves as animals and scattered across the earth, hoping to escape his fury. Only Zeus stood his ground. The battle that followed was the most violent the cosmos had ever witnessed. Zeus hurled thunderbolt after thunderbolt, while Typhon answered with rivers of flame that scorched the sky and boulders torn from the roots of mountains. The earth trembled, forests burned to ash, even the Titans in Tartarus shuddered at the tremors pounding the earth above them. The struggle dragged Typhon and Zeus across land and sea, neither able to gain the upper hand, until at last they met for their final confrontation on the island of Sicily. There, Zeus struck with all his remaining strength, hurling a thunderbolt that staggered even Typhon. Before the monster could recover, Zeus seized an entire mountain and brought it crashing down upon him. Typhon was not killed. A being of such primordial power cannot truly die, but he was trapped beneath the stone, buried under unimaginable weight and unable to rise. That mountain would come to be known as Mount Etna, and to this day it rumbles and spits fire as Typhon writhes in his prison far below. With the last great threat to his rule defeated, Zeus returned to Olympus. The cosmos had settled into its new order at last. The gods ruled from their mountain throne, the Titans languished in darkness, and the monsters had been scattered or imprisoned. The world was now ready for its next creation. The age of mortals was about to begin. Part 5. Prometheus. Among the few Titans spared after the war was Prometheus, who had fought alongside Zeus against his own kind. While the other gods busied themselves with their new domains, Prometheus looked upon the world and found it incomplete. Beasts roamed the forests and birds filled the skies, but there was no creature capable of thought or creation, nothing that could truly appreciate what the gods had built. He descended to the banks of a river and gathered clay in his hands. Working carefully, he shaped a new creature in the image of the gods. It would stand upright on two legs, possess hands capable of building and crafting, and, most importantly, carry a mind capable of reason and understanding. When he breathed life into his creation, the first humans opened their eyes and looked upon the world with wonder. But Prometheus soon realized his work was not finished. His mortals huddled in caves like animals shivering in the darkness. They had minds capable of greatness, yet without one crucial element, they would never rise above the beasts that surrounded them. That element was fire, and fire belonged to the gods alone, a sacred force kept on Olympus, never meant for mortal hands. Prometheus did not care what the gods intended. He climbed to Olympus in secret, stole a burning coal from the divine hearth, and hid it inside a hollow reed. Then he carried it down the mountain and gave it to his creations. With fire, everything changed. Mortals left their caves and built proper shelters. They cooked their food and forged tools from metal. They gathered around flames in the evening, sharing warmth and telling stories. For the first time, something resembling civilization began to emerge. When Zeus looked down from Olympus and saw smoke rising from 1,000 human fires, he was furious. Prometheus had stolen from the gods, and worse, these mortals now lived their lives without offering proper worship or sacrifice. They owed everything to divine gifts, yet gave nothing in return. Zeus decreed that whenever mortals slaughtered an animal for meat, They must sacrifice a portion to the gods, but he made a fatal mistake. He allowed Prometheus, as the creator of humanity, to decide which portion would be offered. But Prometheus's loyalty lay with man rather than the gods. He sacrificed a bull and divided it into 2 portions. On one side he placed the juicy meat hidden beneath the unappealing stomach, while on the other he placed only bare bones, but covered them in a thick layer of delicious fat. He brought both portions before Zeus and invited him to choose. Zeus, not suspecting deception from a Titan who had fought at his side, chose the portion covered in gleaming fat. Only when he unwrapped it did he discover the worthless bones beneath. But the choice had been made, and even Zeus could not reverse what had been witnessed by all the gods. From that day forward, mortals would burn fat and bones as offerings to Olympus, while keeping the nourishing meat for themselves. Zeus was furious, and his rage shook the heavens. He reached down and extinguished every fire burning on earth, plunging humanity back into the cold and darkness. Civilization ground to a halt as people retreated into their caves once more, huddling for warmth and eating raw meat like the beasts they had so recently risen above. But Prometheus could not bear to see his beloved mortals suffer. He climbed to Olympus a second time, stole another burning coal, and once again brought fire back to humanity. When Zeus saw flames flickering across the earth yet again, his fury surpassed anything he had felt before. No Titan would defy him twice and go unpunished. He seized Prometheus and dragged him to the Caucasus Mountains at the edge of the known world. There he chained the Titan to the mountainside with unbreakable bonds of adamantine, driving them deep into the rock so that no power in existence could free him. The punishment Zeus devised was as cruel as it was eternal. Each day as the sun rose over the mountains, a great eagle descended from the sky. It landed on Prometheus's chest and tore out his liver with its beak, devouring the organ while the Titan screamed in agony. Each night, because Prometheus was immortal and could not die, his liver grew back, and when dawn came again, the eagle returned and began its feast anew. This torment would continue for thousands of years. Prometheus had chosen humanity over Olympus, and this was the price of that choice. But the fire he had given to mortals continued to burn, and civilization continued to grow, and Zeus could do nothing to change what had already been set in motion. Part 6. Pandora. But Zeus was not finished. Punishing Prometheus satisfied his vengeance against the Titan, but the mortals themselves remained untouched. They had benefited from the stolen fire, and for that they too must suffer. Zeus needed something subtler than chains and eagles, something that would inflict pain from within their own nature. He summoned Hephaestus, god of the forge, and commanded him to create a new kind of being. Working with the same clay Prometheus had used to shape the first humans, Hephaestus molded a woman, the first of her kind. He brought her to Olympus, where the gods gathered to admire his work. Each deity gave her a gift. Aphrodite granted her beauty that would make mortal hearts ache at the sight of her. Athena dressed her in fine garments and taught her the skills needed to manage a household. Hermes gave her the ability to speak with charm and persuasion, along with a name, Pandora, meaning all gifts, for she had received something from every god on Olympus. But Zeus, always scheming, had given her two gifts. The first was curiosity, an insatiable need to know and discover that which could never be satisfied. The second was a sealed box decorated with painted figures and bound with divine seals. "This contains special gifts," Zeus told her, a false smile on his face. "Blessings meant for mortals. But you must never open it. Swear to me that you will keep it sealed." Pandora, newly made and trusting, swore the oath without understanding what she was promising. Hermes escorted Pandora down to the mortal world and brought her to Epimetheus, the brother of Prometheus. Where Prometheus meant forethought, Epimetheus meant afterthought, and he had never possessed his brother's cunning or wisdom. Prometheus had warned him repeatedly never to accept any gifts from the gods, knowing Zeus would eventually seek revenge. But when Epimetheus saw Pandora standing at his door, radiant and smiling, all memory of his brother's warnings vanished from his mind. He took her as his wife that very day. For a time they were happy. They built a life together on a quiet hillside, tending their animals and their crops. In time, Pandora bore a daughter named Pyrrha, and their small household seemed blessed. But the box sat in the corner of their home, beautiful and sealed, and Pandora could not stop thinking about it. At first it was mild curiosity. She would approach it occasionally, running her fingers along its painted surface, wondering what treasures might lie within. But she would remember her oath to Zeus and turn away. As the years passed, however, the box became an obsession. She would wake in the night and find herself standing before it with no memory of leaving her bed. She would stare at it during meals, barely hearing when Epimetheus spoke to her. The need to know what lay inside consumed her thoughts, growing from a whisper to a scream inside her mind. Finally, on a day when she was alone in the house, her hands moved before her mind could stop them. She broke the seals and lifted the lid. For one heartbeat, the box appeared empty. Then something stirred in its depths, and a great dark cloud exploded outward. It engulfed her, filled the room, poured through the windows and doors, and spread out across the world in every direction. These were not gifts. These were all the sufferings that had never touched humanity before, the curses Prometheus had protected his beloved mortals from receiving. Old age crept into human bones. Disease began to ravage bodies that had been whole. Greed, envy, hatred, violence, and despair all found homes in mortal hearts, spreading from person to person like contagion, passing from parent to child through all the generations that would follow. Pandora forced the lid back down, but it was too late. The evils were loose in the world, and they would never return. She stood, trembling, tears streaming down her face, knowing what she had done. Then she heard a sound from inside the box. Something still remained. Slowly, dreading what she might find, she lifted the lid once more. There, at the bottom, was hope. Hope alone had not escaped. It remained inside, just beyond full reach, never to be completely grasped. This was the final cruelty of Zeus's design. With hope still flickering in their hearts, mortals would endure their suffering. They would face disease and death, greed and violence, knowing they could not escape these evils, yet always believing that tomorrow might somehow be better. Zeus had given humanity reasons to suffer and the desire to keep living. despite it all. Part 7. The Great Flood. The release of the evils from Pandora's box marked the end of an era. Before that moment, humanity had lived in what would come to be known as the Age of Gold, a time of innocence when mortals never grew old, never knew suffering, and death came gently, like falling asleep after a long and satisfying day. But old age had escaped from the box, and the golden race withered and died, their age passing into memory. What followed was the Age of Silver, a lesser time. These new mortals lived long lives, but lacked the wisdom of their predecessors. They were quarrelsome and foolish, refusing to worship the gods or honor their parents. Zeus, disgusted by their behavior, ended that age as well. Then came the Age of Bronze, and humanity fell to its lowest point yet. These mortals were hard and violent, knowing nothing but war. Brother turned against brother, city destroyed city. They fashioned everything from bronze, their weapons, their armor, even their homes, and used it all for slaughter. They had no sense of justice, no mercy, no reverence for anything sacred. Zeus looked down from Olympus and was appalled by what he saw. The realm he ruled as king of the gods had become a wasteland of violence and bloodshed. "Humanity has become a disease upon the earth," he declared to the assembled Olympians. "The only solution is to wipe them clean and begin again." He summoned Poseidon and commanded him to raise the seas. His brother descended to the ocean floor and struck it with his trident. A wave rose from the depths, higher than any mountain, rushing toward the land with terrible speed. From the heavens above, Zeus unleashed rains such as the world had never witnessed. Water fell in solid sheets, drowning the sky itself. Rivers burst their banks and became inland seas. Cities vanished beneath the rising tide. The distinction between land and ocean disappeared entirely as the world became nothing but endless water. All of humanity perished in the flood, all except two, Deucalion and Pyrrha. Deucalion, the son of Prometheus, had received a warning from his father. Even chained to his rock in the Caucasus Mountains, with an eagle tearing at his liver each day, Prometheus had retained the gift of foresight that made him valuable. He sent word to his son, "Build a ship. Build it large and strong. Seal it well. Do not ask why. Do not wait. Do it now." Deucalion obeyed without question. He had married Pyrrha, the daughter of Pandora and Prometheus, and together they worked day and night to build the vessel his father had commanded. When it was finished, they sealed themselves inside as the first drops of rain began to fall. For 9 days and 9 nights, they floated in darkness, listening to the screams of the dying fade into silence, until they were utterly alone on an empty ocean that stretched to every horizon. When the waters finally began to recede, their ship came to rest on the slopes of Mount Parnassus, the only peak high enough to have survived the Great Flood. Deucalion and Pyrrha emerged into a world scoured clean of human life. Not a single house remained standing, not a single voice called out. They truly were the last 2 people alive. They descended the mountain and came upon a temple dedicated to Themis, the Titaness of divine law and prophecy. The temple had been built high enough to escape the floodwaters, and inside the altar still stood. Deucalion and Pyrrha knelt before it and prayed. "We are all that remains," Deucalion said, his voice breaking. "How can humanity continue? We are only two. We cannot repopulate an entire world alone." For a moment there was only silence. Then the voice of Themis echoed through the empty temple, speaking words that didn't seem to make sense. "Cover your heads. Walk from this place. And as you go, throw the bones of your mother behind you." Pyrrha stood abruptly, her face pale. "The bones of our mother? She asks us to commit sacrilege, to desecrate the dead." But Deucalion, who had inherited his father's gift for understanding riddles, grasped the meaning. "She does not mean our mothers by birth," he said slowly. "She means Gaia, the great mother of all living things. The bones of the earth are stones." And so they left the temple and began to walk down the mountain. As they went, they gathered stones and threw them over their shoulders without looking back, trusting in the goddess's words. Behind Deucalion, where each stone struck the ground, a man rose from the earth, fully formed. Behind Pyrrha, each stone became a woman. Day after day they walked, creating new humans with every step, until at last the world was no longer empty. A new age had begun. Humanity, reborn from stone, would spread across the earth once more. But Zeus was watching from Olympus, and the gods would not remain distant for long. They would walk among mortals, desire them, deceive them, and transform them. They would father heroes and monsters, spark wars that would shake the world, and weave fates that no mortal could escape. Humanity had been granted a second chance. Whether they would prove worthy of that gift, only time would tell. I've been David Rintoul for Deep Dive History. Thank you for watching, and see you next time. Goodbye.